Today on Life by the Page, we welcome Claude Hanan, one of South Africa's most influential digital entrepreneurs. Claude is best known as the co-founder of Superbalist, a startup that went from a bold idea between friends to becoming the country's leading online fashion destination, later acquired by Takealot. Under his leadership, Superbalist transformed into now how South Africans shop for style, proving that e-commerce could thrive in a market often said to be too tough for online retail. But Cloud didn't stop there. He's now the co-founder of Bash, a cutting-edge online shopping platform backed by TFG slash the Foschini Group, where he's driving the next wave of digital retail innovation, combining data, technology, and fashion to create a smarter and more connected shopping experience. Beyond the titles, Cloud's story is one of vision, resilience, and scaling ideas into industry shaping businesses.
Can you take us back to your early entrepreneurial days? What motivated you guys to build Superbalist?
So yeah, my entrepreneurial days, I guess, can go back to the years immediately after graduating from UCT. I studied business science non-CA at UCT, graduated in 2006, and my first job was at Allen Gray in the customer support center there. And you field a lot of calls from both customers and financial advisors in that call center. And in speaking to the financial advisors daily, I thought, I can do these guys' jobs better than most of them. Or this was my thinking at the time. So why am I sitting taking calls when I can just go and actually do what they do? I was then introduced to someone through a mutual friend who was an IFA, and he invited me to join him, Stuart Cantor, and we started what is still running as Cannon Wealth, which is a financial advisory firm. So I guess that was really my first foray into entrepreneurship. At the same time, myself and a friend from school were interested. It was on the back of the 2008 financial crisis, and we were looking at picking up relatively inexpensive homes that banks had repossessed at the time. So I think, like, in general, there was always this innate desire to build. So those two things were kind of going together. And then the real opportunity or moment came when I read about Groupon, which was at the time the fastest growing company in the history of commerce. I read about it in a Fortune magazine, sitting on a plane on a family holiday, and came back. This was around 2010. Came back to Cape Town and asked a few friends if anyone had heard of Groupon, because it sounded like a great business and a highly successful one. And one of those people was Luke Jadakin, who is my co-founder and business partner in our businesses since then. But really, what came from that was first City Mob, which was a Groupon clone, and that grew or pivoted into Superbalist, and all the other kind of side businesses or ventures fell away as I doubled down on what I believe to be the much bigger, clearer opportunity. So that was kind of the backstory of entrepreneurship.
So, what was the vision behind Superbalist, and how has it, evolved over the years before it got acquired by Takealot?
Yeah, I think maybe well, from my perspective, a little less glamorous than people would tend to believe. It was really born out of necessity. So we had the City Mob business. It was based on the group buying model, and between launching City Mob and kind of 6 months post launch, there were 45 similar businesses in the market. So there were just no barriers to entry, and it was incredibly difficult to differentiate yourself in that business model. So we pivoted to something that we believed had bigger barriers to entry, which was essentially a traditional e-com business where you had to ship products. Customers would order goods, they would get those shipped to their homes or to their offices, as opposed to the group buying model where you just got an email. It was a lot easier for anyone to launch the group buying model versus the traditional e-com business. It was naive in many ways because the traditional e-com business is a lot more capital intensive. It is also a lot more complex. So yes, there are barriers to entry and it's easier to defend, but it's more expensive to run, and you have to quickly scale the thing in order to get it to break even. So during that pivot, City Mob was no longer fit for purpose because we needed to build relationships with brands and with a source of supply that was in demand, and those brands and that source of supply didn't want to be associated with deep discounts. And so we rebranded. And at the time, it was very unpopular to customers. Customers loved City Mob, but suppliers didn't. So we did it essentially to secure a source of supply. Change is always difficult. We remember that clearly from the City Mob to Superbalist pivot. We remember it in more recently in launching Bash, both internally and externally to customers. The months post launch, you get inundated with complaints and criticism, but that's pretty normal. You just have to push through it. So yeah, Superbalist was born out of necessity, and we continued to work, or I guess grow on what it was. So we launched kids, for example. We changed direction slightly on what homeware meant within the world of Superbalist. And essentially just we kind of goal seeked customer growth and revenue growth. That kind of forced our hand in what we wanted to build and what we wanted to make it become.
So I was watching the Inside Show interview with Luke Jerikin. He mentions that after building Superbalist, of course there was the growth in the company, but there was a bit problems and challenges experienced as new players became to come into the field, right? In terms of Spree. So there's this book, right, called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. So he talks about the monopolies and the perfect competition. That's the difference. That's the metaverse, right? The perfect competition, and that's monopolies. So in terms of monopolies in the e-commerce space, I was wondering, how did you guys found the gap? Because Peter Thiel explains this concept of Google and airlines, right? So Google stands alone in the competition arena, right? Because it has a market share of 80% compared to other companies, right? In terms of retrieving that revenue of profits. And then you find the perfect competitions like airlines. They have a lot of competition in terms of there's airlines in this place, airlines in that space. So I want to ask you
Yeah.
guys, how did you beat the competition, and how did you find the gap in the market in terms of getting there and dominating in the e-commerce space? Because you guys went into number one at some point.
Yeah, look, I think we sold to Takealot, so we realized shortly after that pivot, as I mentioned, that it was expensive. It was naive in that regard. You know, we wanted to move into a space that was less crowded. So sure, we moved there, but the downside is that it's more expensive, and you actually need firepower. You need cash. You need to be funded. You need to be well funded. And at the time, Takealot had just raised $100 million from Tiger Global. And that was around 2014. So selling to Takealot, before we sold to Takealot, we had two failed due diligence. The one lasted about 6 months. It was with Naspers. The other lasted like 3 months. It was with a UK hedge fund. And you know, that's quite a testing time, because you think you're going to raise money, you're doing a lot of work at trying to expand your business to these other parties, only for it to fall and turn into nothing. So it's quite emotionally taxing, and you still don't have money. So the Takealot DD went fairly quickly. It was 6 weeks, and then we had a big brother. Now that acquisition also helped us define with a bit more clarity who we were. So we were, now that we were sat within Takealot, we were very clearly fashion only. You know, fashion and lifestyle, I guess, a bit of homeware, but we were fashion. We were an online fashion retailer. So yeah, I just regards to Peter Thiel's monopoly versus perfect competition, being in retail is far closer to the perfect competition analogy, because you can't really differentiate between online and offline. It's just retail in general, and retail is infamously highly competitive. So I don't think it's a company that would necessarily appeal to Thiel's like investment thesis, but that doesn't mean it can't make a great business. It just means you have to work damn hard. You have to outwork, you have to outsmart, you have to like outcare, you have to sweat the small stuff. So I think having money helped. We got money a little bit later in the game. Like Zando was funded earlier, then we got funded. So it's almost like we leapfrogged them, potentially purely based on timing and luck. And then Spree we merged with because Naspers became a majority shareholder of the Takealot group, and they didn't see any value in having two online fashion retailers. It just made no sense. Put them together. So we became the biggest. And I guess we had enormous market share online in online fashion retail. But retail is much bigger and is channel agnostic. So you're always up against new players. You're always up against pretty intense competition. And we just have we are built to be like highly detail oriented, and to never, we're also like default paranoid. So like Luke and I never actually believe we're crushing it. I think that's a big part of our success. There's always a desire to be better, to do more. So complacency doesn't enter the picture. So we got there, I think it's always the story, through a bit of luck, good timing, hard work, persistence, perseverance, and time. You know, it was, we left that chapter having been at it for 10 years. And yes, we were the market leader, but it wasn't an overnight thing.
Do you think physical retail is dying? Because I see shops like Shoprite, right? They're exiting the other African countries, closing maximum of 15 trading stores, etc. Pick and Pay, the Pick and Pay is already dying. It has a market value of zero outside of Boxer. So I wanna ask your perspective on the complexities and the in the South African landscape specifically. Is the
Yes.
yeah.
Look, I can't speak for Africa, and those geographies. I have very little IP on the retail operations in those geographies. But in South Africa, physical retail remains the 90% like opportunity. It's 90% of the market. E-commerce is growing fast, but it's a fraction of the size. So it's certainly not dying. I think retail has changed. Not is changing too, but has changed. And I think that statement is quite contentious still in certain businesses. I think Pick and Pay didn't understand that, or they weren't alive to it as quickly as they should have been. Acknowledging the fact that retail has changed means you change your approaches, you change your the things you decide to invest capex into, you change your views on talent and hiring, the types of skills you need in an organization. And globally, certain companies have been good at that, certain retailers have been good at that, and certain ones haven't. It's not just retail specific, it happens in many industries. You've got these clear winners who a few decades later are irrelevant. This pattern is fairly well known and well documented. Like the makeup of the S&P 100, let's say, or the top 50 businesses on earth is very different with it, like every 20 years that you look at it. It's just kind of the natural life cycle of these businesses. So to stay a leader is super difficult. To become a leader is hard. To stay a leader is also hard. So no, but bricks isn't dead. Retail has changed. That means these entities have to change, and change is uncomfortable. And certain players locally have been much better at that than others. Shoprite have been very good. TFG have taken pretty bold steps to try keep up with this pace of change. And there's pretty good things to show for it on TFG side within the success of the omni-channel strategy. So yeah, I don't know if that answers exactly. I'm happy to dig into any aspect more.
Yeah, sure. You touched on very good concepts. I want to ask, like, how do you choose the right people to build, a startup with? How do you hire? I heard, your guys are always in the interview process. You're always involved in finding your talent.
Yeah.
John Rupert says, his biggest lesson is learned. I think it was an interview done 13 years back. He said the biggest business lesson is learned. You have to, or he says, culture beats PowerPoint any time of the day. So you have to set the rule at the top. So when you're hiring, I think how you guys hire and how do you find the right talent in your organization? If I'm a specific young South African, I want to be involved in your ventures. How do I become that person that's Claude is gonna be taking
The
in with
chosen
you?
candidate. Yeah, look, I think so. Firstly, there's no silver bullet. I've historically found interviews very hit and miss. Like I've almost said no to certain candidates. Not that our vote is the all powerful one or the entire. So firstly, there's an interview process. There's 3 rounds of interviews where you test for different things. Luke and I will be a part of the final round where we know that this individual is competent and capable to actually do the task at hand, is sufficiently technical, and the team likes them and wants them to join the company. Now we have to do the final sense check on culture. Now, interviews are difficult because there have been times in the past where I've almost voted no in my votes on someone who has turned out to be enormously productive and positive for the business. And the inverse is also true, where someone can be a strong yes and they turn out to be disappointing relative to your expectations. So interviews are imperfect. That's one point. But what is culture? So yeah, it's something I'm particularly passionate about. Culture is, one definition is that it's a 50-day moving average of how things are at a business. So not what you want them to be, not what you say they will be, it's how they are. How are meetings conducted? How quickly are certain initiatives delivered? How close to the initial expected deadline are initiatives delivered? How well are products built? How do employees engage with one another? What standards do employees hold each other to? Do we work from the office? Do we work remote? Do we have our cameras on in interviews? That is how a company is, not what they promise to be. So that is culture. What you do, what you actually do is who you are, not what you say you're going to do, not what you wish you would do. It's what you do that defines you. So how do you keep, firstly, you've got to define that, and we try quite hard to do that, and company values are important and just general ways of working. But this requires constant repetition and constant reinforcement, because without that, culture will decay. And part of the reason it will decay is because you're constantly hiring people. Any business is constantly hiring people, even, well, not any, but most. Even if your net headcount stays the same, people leave, people retire, people resign. So you've got new individuals, new personalities coming into the business. In our case, we're also increasing headcount because revenue growth is 40, 50% year on year. We're increasing headcount. So, so oftentimes we have, especially as season approaches, when we resource our delivery hubs or our customer support centers, we're bringing in 30, 40 people a month during those peak times. Outside of peak, we're bringing in 5 to 10 new individuals every single month. Now, is every single one of those going to be like accretive to culture? Probably impossible. So you got to aim for like 8 out of those 10. You've just got to somehow ensure that on average, or a little bit better than average, there's talent density happening, not the inverse. So that is, I guess, what we're testing for in interviews. And in terms of like what I look for, I know Brian Chesky's spoken about this a few times, the founder of Airbnb. I make it clear in those final interviews that it's really not easy to work at Bash. It's like, are you sure you want this? Because whilst it's fulfilling and it's like educational. It's a period of massive growth, massive personal and professional growth. It's not easy. It can be fun, and I compare it often to a professional sports team. Like playing for the Springboks is a super high pressure responsibility. And I think this is something that South Africans kind of just naturally understand. It doesn't matter if the Springboks are playing like away in Auckland in New Zealand on like a dark, rainy Saturday night. No one cares. They're expected to win. They are actually expected to win. And if they lose, it'll be a bit disappointing. And so like there's an absence of excuses in the mindset of a sports team. And when you ask how it is playing for the Springboks, I don't think anyone would ever say easy. Same for like a premiership team or any professional sports team. Easy is not a word associated with it. It's many other things. So I think it's very important to land that, because it's, that people who are keen for that are going to drive us forward as an organization. It's not a place to chill, and it is a place to deliver. It's a place to push yourself and to push your colleagues. So if you show that, then I would like to think you've got a really good chance at making it through.
Do you think corporate acquisitions like Takealot Group kill the entrepreneurial spirits, or do they build, or help startups scale? Yeah, that's the.
Yeah, I think it's case by case. It is a symbiotic relationship because they both need each other. And when these big businesses buy small businesses, there is an injection of talent that happens, but there's also a bit of an injection of bureaucracy going the other way, which is natural. Some controls, in some ways, the startup will slow down. Over time, I think you find, as founders leave, that startup that was bought becomes completely swallowed by the juggernaut. But then, of course, it depends on the culture of the juggernaut. You have some very big companies who act small, who remain nimble. So I think, in a word, I guess it depends.
Do you think SA e-commerce can ever catch up to the global giants like Amazon or Shein, or do you have to play a different game? And what is your favorite book?
Sure. I think my initial feeling or thoughts is that we have to play a different game. It's just the sheer assortment, the selection on these platforms, on Amazon and Shein. I know in Amazon it's in the hundreds of millions of SKUs. I don't know the number for Shein, but I think it's probably similar. It's just it's either impossible or very difficult for a local e-commerce business to challenge them on assortment. But you can fight like on other vectors and optimize other metrics. For example, delivery turnaround time, and this is something Takealot have done very well. They've got incredibly reliable and fast delivery. 60/60 did the same, incredibly reliable, super fast delivery. So there are many things at TFG and Bash that are unique to TFG. Our store network, 3,500 stores. It's something that the international players will never have in this country. That means we're close to tens of millions of customers. So yeah, I think you must focus on your own strengths, and local IP matters. There's other emerging markets like Brazil, for example, where Amazon have had a tough time taking on the more local operators. So all is not lost, but I would say focus on your strengths. And then favorite book, I must say I read less than I would like to, and it's mostly the fault of X, Twitter, and modern day internet ADHD. But I love the Disney book, Once in a Lifetime. I thought that was, I think that's what it calls. I thought that was super interesting. And then, funny enough, the Pixar book, which is closely related, which talks to, it's called Creativity Inc. It talks to the early days of Pixar, Steve Jobs' involvement, how that almost failed, how close it was to death, and then Toy Story rescued it, the success of Toy Story in the early 90s. I find, funnily enough, I wish I could read fiction, because I actually find reading business books is like at times unhealthy for me, because it just makes me even more inspired or ambitious to drive things. And it's like I've got enough of that. I'm busy reading the Capitec book, for example. And I'm reading it slowly because yeah, it's just brilliant. They were phenomenal, and it makes me want to drive change faster than we already are. But in life, that's not always the right call. Like, change takes time, and being um, overly aggressive on the need to change can actually backfire. So yeah, I love any business book, any good biography of a business person. I would be interested in your favorites books, but we can chat about
Well,
that after the call.
sure, sure. I just had an epiphany about this concept of growing your customer base, and I just want to ask just one more question, because I remember your guys, when you were growing your customer base, you're actually throwing off those refer to a friend, programs, right? To with the discount of 60% in whatever product you were selling at that time. And I remember Peter Thiel, but his approach was um, to pay each customer at least each new customer $10 each, to grow the customer base, because it's too small. It's a startup. Remember that. And how do you balance, between attracting more customers at the same time, you know, gaining profits?
Yeah. So in a word, it's like the answer is maths. You have to be pretty sharp with your calculations on the like present value of those actions. It's like so you need data, and you need to very closely monitor the future value of the customer based on what promotion you gave to that customer on day one. And you can A/B test a whole lot of mechanisms. And you need quite a big sample size. I guess that's one of the challenges, and you need dashboards that are clear and easy to use and accurate. And you need to be very careful to back the winning strategies and do away with the losing ones. It's dangerous because you can train customers badly. You can bring in unprofitable customers. Now, this was not an issue between like 2015 and 2020. You know, growing customer bases was like the primary objective. That narrative has changed a bit as interest rates have increased again, and like profitability is back in vogue in VC Silicon Valley circles. So you have to be careful. You have to get it right. You need product market fit. So you naturally find that if what you're offering is actually desirable and serves a niche or serves a market, you don't have to discount it as much to get people to engage with it.
Thank you so much, Claude. It was an honor and a privilege to have you in the platform and for you to actually acknowledge this channel. It's truly an honor.
Absolutely, yeah, a real pleasure to be here, and yeah, well done to you on everything you're doing. Keep it up, and yeah, looking forward to seeing it grow in the months and years ahead.